पर्सि मङ्गलबार चाहिँ सिजनल एन्ड रिजनल लेबर सर्टेजेस इन अ लेबर सरप्लस इकोनोमी एभिडेन्स फ्रम रुरल नेपाल भनेर ईश्वर अधिकारी जसले चाहिँ साउथ एसियन युनिभर्सिटीमा आफ्नो पिएचडी भर्खरै पाउनुभयो साउथ एसियन युनिभर्सिटीबाट उहाँले बोल्नुहुनेछ। आजको एक हप्तामा चाहिँ बियोन्ड कन्क्वेस्ट वुमेन्स आउटडोर काउन्टर न्यारेटिभ्स एन्ड द डिकोलोनाइजेसन अफ एडभेन्चर स्पोर्ट्स भनेर डेनिसा क्रास्ना जो चाहिँ चेक रिपब्लिकको पालकी युनिभर्सिटीमा पढाउनुहुन्छ, त्यहाँ उहाँ पोस्टडक हुनुहुन्छ, त्यो उहाँले प्रेजेन्ट गर्नुहुनेछ। र 29 अक्टोबरमा चाहिँ मार्टिन चौतारी र ऊर्जा खबरको मासिक जुन ऊर्जा सम्बन्धी छलफल श्रृङ्खला छ त्यसमा चाहिँ जलविद्युत विकास र पुँजी बजार चुनौती र सम्भावना भनेर रामकृष्ण खतिवडा जो चाहिँ विद्युत नियमन आयोगको पूर्व सदस्य र नेपाल इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर ब्याङ्कको पूर्व प्रमुख कार्यकारी अधिकारी हुनुहुन्छ, उहाँले बोल्नुहुनेछ। 3 नोभेम्बर र 5 नोभेम्बरमा 3 नोभेम्बर भनेको चाहिँ सायद भाइटिकाकै दिन पर्छ क्यारे, त्यो दिन तिहारको अब कारणले नहुने भयो। 5 नोभेम्बर चाहिँ तिहारको थकाइ र छठ आउन लागेको अपेक्षामा चाहिँ छलफल नहुनेवाला छ। त्यसपछिको केही कार्यक्रमहरू चाहिँ हाम्रो वेबसाइटमा अनाउन्स भइसकेको छ। अब तपाईँहरूले चाहिँ यो पोस्टर पाउनु भएन भने चाहिँ हाम्रो वेबसाइटमा, ट्विटरमा र फेसबुकमा फलो गर्न सक्नुहुन्छ। मैले ल्याउन बिर्सेछु, तर मार्टिन चौतारीको सबभन्दा नयाँ पुस्तक चाहिँ नेपाल इन द लङ 1950s भनेर अस्ति दसैँको ठ्याक्कै 1-2 दिन अगाडि निस्केको छ। त्यो किताब चाहिँ अहिले बजारको काठमाडौँको मुख्य पुस्तक पसलहरूमा र पोखराको एउटा पुस्तक पसलमा पुगिसक्यो। अरू ठाउँमा चाहिँ पुग्ने क्रममा छ, दसैँको कारणले सबै ठाउँमा पुर्याउन पाइएको थिएन। त्यो चाहिँ यहाँ लिन सक्नुहुन्छ हाम्रो फ्रन्ट डेस्कबाट र लाइब्रेरीमा पढ्न सक्नुहुन्छ। अरू अनाउन्समेन्टहरू चाहिँ एन्ड अफ अक्टोबरमा पछि हाम्रो एन्ड अफ नोभेम्बरमा हाम्रो 3 दिने एनुअल कन्फरेन्स हुन्छ। तर त्यसको स्केड्युल र कल फर पार्टिसिपेसन, पब्लिक कल फर एनीबडी हु इज नट प्रेजेन्टिङ बट वान्ट्स टु पार्टिसिपेट चाहिँ समटाइम आफ्टर नोभेम्बर 7 को हाराहारीमा त्यो पब्लिक कल जान्छ, 4 साल जस्तै। अनि यहाँले रजिस्टर गरेर त्यो कन्फरेन्स अटेन्ड गर्न सक्नुहुन्छ। कन्फरेन्सको डेट चाहिँ 27, 28, 29 नोभेम्बर हो। सो आई थिङ्क द्याट्स वेन्सडे, थर्सडे, फ्राइडे, द लास्ट वेन्सडे, थर्सडे, फ्राइडे अफ नोभेम्बर है।
पैदल अनुसन्धान डेडलाइन
त्यो हाम्रो वेबसाइटमा एउटा पैदल अनुसन्धान भन्ने प्रोग्रामको अनाउन्समेन्ट छ। यहाँहरूलाई भन्दा पनि यहाँहरूले चिनेका मान्छेहरूलाई चाहिँ इन्ट्रेस्ट छ भने एक्चुली त्यो चाहिँ विशेष गरेर मध्य प्रदेश र लुम्बिनी प्रदेशलाई बसिरहेर काम गरिरहेको मान्छेहरूको लागि चाहिँ जुन पहिला हामीले बेयरफुट रिसर्च 1 र 2 भनेर जसरी गरेको थियौँ त्यस्तै खालको काम हो। त्यो किताब चाहिँ एक्चुली घुमाइदिउँ है। अरू अनाउन्समेन्ट छैन भने चाहिँ एक्चुली एक राउन्ड परिचय गरौँ, अनि म मरिजीको परिचय गर्छु, अनि त्यसपछि हामी आजको छलफल गरौँ। मेरो नाम चाहिँ प्रतिसन्त हो, म चौतारीमा काम गर्छु।
नमस्ते, म बिएल भाइ। नमस्ते, म हरिसन सञ्चार। नमस्ते, म उपेन्द्र रिटेल।
नमस्ते, म रमेश टर्जी।
नमस्ते, म कृष्ण आचार्य।
नमस्ते, म समित साके।
म देवेन्द्र।
नमस्ते, म निर्मला अधिकारी।
नमस्ते, म राज्यलक्ष्मी। म सञ्जना गुप्ता।
म रुख गुरुङ। आजको हाम्रो वक्ता चाहिँ डाक्टर मरी लेकम्प-तिलोन, जो चाहिँ बसो पहिला आउने अनि परिचय पनि गर्ने, दुईजनाको पाला।
नमस्ते, म प्रमोद भट्ट।
नमस्ते, I'm Krishna Shrestha.
बसौँ। आजको प्रेजेन्टेसनको टाइटल चाहिँ कल्चरल मिसअन्डरस्ट्यान्डिङ्स एन्ड डिस्टोर्सन्स 2 केसेस अमङ द मगर्स एन्ड द नेवार्स भनेर चाहिँ मरिजीले बोल्नुहुनेछ। मरिजी चाहिँ नेपालमा रिसर्च गर्न थालेको चाहिँ धेरै लामो समय भइसक्यो। उहाँ फर्स्ट टाइम 1982 मा नेपाल आउनुभएको रहेछ। कोही हामीहरू अलि त्यति बेला स्कुल सिकाउँदैथ्यौँ, कोही जन्मेका थिएन मलाई कोठामा वरिपरि, कोही चाहिँ यसो अरू के गर्दै थियौँ। सो इट्स बिन अ लङ टाइम सिन्स इज बिन डुइङ रिसर्च इन नेपाल, पर्टिकुलरली मगर समुदायसँग सम्बन्धित उहाँको रिसर्च सुरुदेखि हो, अहिलेसम्म पनि त्यो जारी छ, किनभने आजको प्रेजेन्टेसनमा पनि त्यो देखिनेवाला छ। अहिले उहाँ चाहिँ फ्रान्सको चाहिँ जुन सेन्ट्रल रिसर्च इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर छ त्यसमा चाहिँ जुन सेन्ट्रल छ ठुलो CNRS भन्ने, त्यसको फ्रेन्च विस्तारित नाम छ, त्यसको सदस्य हुनुहुन्छ। धेरै समयसम्म चाहिँ उहाँ चाहिँ त्यो त्यहाँभित्रको हिमालयन रिसर्च ग्रुपको सदस्य हुनुहुन्थ्यो। अहिले चाहिँ उहाँ हाउ डु प्रोनाउन्स दिस ल्याबोरेटरी डु एन्थ्रोपोलोजी सोसियल इन कलेज डि फ्रान्स, विच इज CNRS, EHESS र कलेज डि फ्रान्सको संयुक्त युनिट हो, त्यहाँ हुनुहुन्छ। So Mori has conducted research in Nepal for, as I said, 4 decades. and she's coordinated 4 collective programs of research in Nepal and the Western Himalayas since 2000. She's now heading a program on it's called Stones Fallen from the Sky, including the PEPR origins. Now, we can probably ask her about what all of this means during the discussion. This project explores the extraterrestrial origins of life. Mati Chautari Library, if you check the catalog, it shows that there are at least 7 books under her name, including Hindu Kingship, Ethnic Revival and Maoist Rebellion in Nepal, published by Oxford in the year 2009. An edited volume, Bards and Mediums, History, Culture and Politics in the Central Himalayan Kingdoms, published out of Almora by the Almora Book Depot in the year 2009. Revolution in Nepal, OUP 2013. Some of you might remember that around the time when this book came out, we had a discussion on the book in our previous seminar room, which was all sitting down on the floor type. And then she has an edited volume called Nature, Culture and Religion at the Crossroads of Asia, which was published out by Routledge in 2017. And then this year, there have been 2 books published by her. One collection of her, well, not a collection, a monograph, Sacrifice and Violence, Reflections from an Ethnography in Nepal, published by Cambridge University Press, and co-edited volume with Andy Sells called Encounters with the Invisible, Revisiting Spirit Possession in the Himalayas. Both of these are library's copies. I will circulate them, but please make sure that they come back to me. So अब मरिजीले सुरुमा बोल्नुहुन्छ, त्यसपछि हाम्रो उहाँसँग छलफल गर्ने पालो. अब all yours.
I'm going to start. So today I would like to present 2 case studies of cultural misunderstandings and distortions. I will then shortly discuss them using theories of acculturation, and I hope to delve into the topic deeper with your questions. So the first case involves the relationship between the Newars and Christian missionaries in the 18th century Kathmandu Valley. Jesuit Christian missionaries came to Nepal in search of Christians in Tibet who had been brought to their attention by merchants at Magars court. After a few brief visits between 1628 and 1679, they abandoned the project. It was then the turn of the Capuchins based in India, in Patna, to obtain from Rome the right to set out in search of the legendary Christians of Tibet. In 1706, 6 of them arrived in Kathmandu, where they had to stay for 4 months because they did not have enough money to pay for the passage fee. They finally reached Lhasa in June 1707, but their journey had been so difficult that they decided to establish a chain of stations between India and Tibet, using Kathmandu as a stopover. A station was opened there in 1714, where the Capuchins experienced difficult years, and they decided to move to Bhaktapur in 1722, which they left 9 years later, this time due to a lack of personnel. This first period of missionary activity is poorly documented, but it already mentions numerous baptisms of dying children, one of the points I would like to highlight and question here. 5 years after the missionary departed in 1736, the kings of Kathmandu and Bhaktapur, hearing of the arrival of new Capuchins in Patna, requested the prefect of the mission to send missionaries to their kingdom. The king of Bhaktapur, Ranjit Malla, donated a building for the fathers to establish their church, and upon their request, issued a decree on freedom of conscience. In return, he asked them to change their black dress, which scared his subjects, for a white dress. The donation of a building and a decree of freedom of conscience, were also done in Kathmandu, then in Patan. Later, in 1764, a missionary was also assigned to Newars following repeated requests from the Gorkha king since 1755. He was also granted a chapel and the freedom to preach. The Tibet mission of the Capuchin is particularly interesting with its chain of stations from Patna to Lhasa, where missionaries of the same order and the same men moving from one station to another spread the same ideas and the same religious and medical practices to the local people. This allows for a comparison of how their presence was received in these three contexts of India, Nepal, and Tibet. While the missionaries did not document every aspect, they did record fairly accurately the number of baptisms. In this matter, whereas history books claim that the missionaries in Nepal converted almost no one, a surprise awaits us. Indeed, Father Francis Horace reported that between 1725 and 1733, 2,587 dying children were baptized in Nepal, almost one a day. Lecomte-Tilouine, his successor, counted 2,525 baptisms of dying children between 1737 and 1750, indicating a slight slowdown. Since each mission kept its own registers, we can get a better idea of their distribution in the Kathmandu Valley. Half the baptisms took place in Bhaktapur, while in Kathmandu they were 5 times fewer in absolute terms and 10 times fewer in relation to the population as estimated by the missionary at the time, to be twice that of Bhaktapur. Patan stands in between with 909 baptisms. In Timi near Bhaktapur there were also 109 and 151 in other villages. The number of adult baptisms in Nepal during the same period was between 78 and 82, while the number of marriages was only 9. By contrast, in Lhasa and Patna, no baptism of dying children are reported. The number of adult baptisms in Lhasa amounts to 40 for the whole period of the mission, almost 30 years, and to 50 baptisms in the Patna region between 1736 and 1750. In terms of adult baptisms, therefore, the numbers in the three contexts are very comparable. But the striking difference between India, Tibet, and Nepal is the very important number of dying children baptized in Nepal, a total which amounted to 20,000, according to one of the missionaries quoted by Father Vanini. The letter concludes from these figures that infant mortality in Nepal must have been higher than in India and Tibet. However, this factor alone cannot explain why the baptism of dying children was hardly practiced outside Nepal, nor why it was so massive in this context. The uneven distribution of this practice within the region and within the various micro-kingdoms of Nepal seems to rule out the possibility that baptism was imposed by the missionaries as part of the medical care they offered in their dispensaries, given that the same fathers passed from one dispensary to another. Similarly, Newars adult baptisms were not more numerous in Bhaktapur and Timi, where the highest number of baptisms of dying children were recorded. The missionaries reported only 6 converts and 5 catechumen in Bhaktapur, compared to 38 converts in Kathmandu and 18 in Patan. But above all, Father Francis Ores is precise on this point. He writes that in Nepal, when a child is dying, the parents themselves call the priest so that the child, I quote him, may be purified by the waters of baptism and have access to the glory of God. This explanation is surprising since we know that from the writings of these very missionaries that the Newars were far from considering baptism as a rite of purification. But the very small number of baptisms administered to the dying outside Nepal suggests that Francis Ores is not inventing the Newar parents' attitude. Of course, it is possible that the missionaries, blinded by their own reading frame, misunderstood the Newar parents' exact requests among all the other misunderstandings of the time. One of the most notable examples I found were in the writings of the French founder of the Capuchin mission in Tibet, François-Marie de Tours, who wrote from Patna on November 26, 1706, about the deposition of the 6th Dalai Lama in June of this year. I quote him, "The great Lama, whom they regard as a god, is someone who never dies and who, each time he becomes old, regains his youth. This Lama, who is currently young, has taken wives, breaking the ancient traditions of Lama. When he was severely reprimanded by one of the members of his court, he banished the latter, but this church gathered an army, was victorious, and sent this young god to prison." So you can see the misunderstanding. Without completely dismissing the possibility of a misunderstanding about the Newar parents' attitude by the missionaries, the latter were also fully aware that baptism led to exclusion from the caste in the Nepal of that time. Joseph Darrovato, for example, after spending 5 years in Nepal, identified the main reasons for people reluctant to convert as follows: poverty, attachment to ancestral traditions, constant fear due to the endemic state of war, but above all, the importance of caste. I quote him, "They would rather die in their caste than live without it." An episode described in detail by the Capuchin Fathers gives a good idea of what was at stake. On March 28, 1750, a Newar widow and her 3 children were baptized in the church of Kathmandu. Her children were already ill, apparently, as the youngest, a 4-year-old girl, died of smallpox 40 days later. It is likely that the mother had turned to the priest as a last resort and that she herself may have been baptized without fully understanding the consequences given her isolation. The widow's relatives and members of her caste were supposed to make arrangements for the child's Christian burial, wrote the missionary who reported the event. And I quote him, "But instead, they heaped scorn and hatred on the widow for becoming a Christian and refused to take part in the funeral." Upon hearing this, the father approached the Raja of Kathmandu, Jayaprakash Malla, who ordered that the child be buried in the Christian cemetery in the presence of her relative. But the widow's relative immediately turned on her, demanding payment of legal purification, suggesting that they feared being judged impure themselves. The missionaries then took the widow to the home of a Christian in Bhaktapur for her protection. The widow's 6-year son passed away in the Kathmandu dispensary 15 days after his sister, without his mother being able to come to his side or attend his funeral, and the missionaries asked the king what he should do. The king ordered the members of the caste to fulfill their duty in order to inherit the property of the dead child's father. but the religious head of the caste declared that they would lose their caste themselves, and the widow was harassed more than ever. So the missionaries wrote to the king of Kathmandu, copying the Rajguru, asking him to declare that the woman had not lost her caste because of her conversion. The king referred the matter to the Rajguru, the supreme judge of caste and religion. We must have gone to him nearly 100 times, the missionary report says. Finally, the Rajguru questioned the woman, asking her if she had eaten with the missionaries, accepted food from them, or had food cooked by them. Finding nothing to incriminate her, he declared that she had not lost her caste, but that a member of her caste would need to come and confirm that she was still a member. After a long search, the missionaries finally found someone willing to testify, but he never came forward to do so. We don't know the end of the story, but it contains several practices that are still observable, such as the formal severing of caste ties at funerals, or the ceremony of reintegration into the caste through public recognition of the outcast by his peers. There are also contentious issues such as inheritance. The king makes it clear to his subjects that a baptized child retains the right to his father's property, and that members of his caste can only inherit this property after the death of the dead child is reintegrated into his caste by attending his funeral. His subjects, however, take a different view, expressing their fear of being excluded in turn if they attend it. This question is closely linked to that of Christian pollution, which also seems ill-defined. The narrative describes two opposing conceptions, that of caste pollution as an incorporated quality through the ingestion of water or food, which the king and his Rajguru try to impose on their reluctant subjects, and that of the latter, who have a more categorical conception: to be Christian is to be impure, regardless of what you eat. So, if the idea of purifying dying children through baptisms was probably not a motive, except perhaps for the missionaries blinded by their faith, we need to understand why so many Newar parents brought their dying children to be baptized. It is tempting to propose some explanations based on current practice, as we can observe that in Nepal, infants are still subjected to defilement or pollution in order to protect them. Traditionally, they are dressed in soiled clothes for the first few months until they are offered clean new clothes during the passing ceremony, at which time they are also defied by being fed their first solid food. The practices of defilement are more elaborate for the most vulnerable children, who are often called by an impure name or are symbolically given away or sold to an untouchable individual. In the testimonies I have gathered, this is a purely symbolic sale that does not involve any special bond between the child and the buying family, nor any different treatment of the child by their family members during or after the sale. However, in some cases, these experiences can be traumatic. For example, a man from Panauti, whom I interviewed in Pokhara last week, told me that his childhood was miserable because, I quote him, his mother threw him away to a poor woman when he was 3. On further inquiry, he was in fact taken back immediately after. Yet, this action left a lasting trauma on him. I also met in Pokhara last week a Ranjit Newar lady in her 50s who told me that she threw away her child using the same verb "fanu" as the man from Panaoti in order to protect him. She described the procedure which involved digging a hole, filling it with cow dung and placing the child in it while pretending to give in to a Sarki woman. In this context of Pokhara, where the Newars live with Hill Hindus, they may therefore use non-Newar lower caste as recipients of their endangered children, a fact which suggests that they may have also used the missionaries for the same purpose in the past. A long time has passed since the Capuchin Fathers left Nepal. Practices may have been less symbolic in the past, and in the face of an epidemic, they may have been different. However, the principle of exposing a child to pollution to protect them from death is still in use. We can therefore assume that the Newars may have used baptism as a new ritual device to make their vulnerable child untouchable through the intervention of convenient untouchable actors who did not require payment and who even had dispensaries for this service. In these specific epidemic circumstances, where none of the dying children who received baptism are reported to have survived, it is also possible that the protection they sought was in fact for their other children and themselves. The Newar parents would have found a way to send the soul of their potentially dangerous dying children into a parallel world detached from their family and caste, in order to protect themselves and their other children from possible future attacks from their souls, their dead souls. On their side, the missionaries kept intact their own vision that they were purifying these children so they could more easily reach the kingdom of God. Or it is also possible that they were well aware of the twist but took advantage of the situation to record a high number of baptisms to please Rome. In this case, the cohabitation between the two groups in presence was short, and the cultural distance between them was so great that no traces or hybrid forms of this cultural diversion were left to my knowledge. The situation is different regarding the cohabitation of Janjati groups with Hill Hindus, such as the Magars of Gulmi, from which I will draw here a second example of cultural misunderstandings. This situation is more complex due to a long history of cohabitation and resulted in what could be described as a sort of game. The study context is a mixed locality inhabited by 1/3 Bahu Chetri, 1/3 Magars, and 1/3 Dalit, mainly Kami. The area was occupied by a mine until the 1920s, which kept the Bahu Chetri, who were banned from working at the mine, at a distance from the Magar and Khatmi who worked there, extracting the ore and refining it. The last two groups, on the other hand, has drawn from it a proximity which they describe as a relationship between Mama Banja, maternal uncle, and nephew. Indeed, we see that both practice the same form of alliance with the matrilateral cross-cousin, Mama Kochori, unlike their Bahu Chetri neighbors, or unlike the Kami residing in other regions in Nepal. The system of alliance and kingship has strangely remained intact among these Magars, who are strongly Hinduized and have lost the use of their language, this for at least a century and a half, according to the elders. This system leads, in parallel with their strong acculturation, to significant distortions and diversions of the Hindu culture that has been imposed on them. The Magar of northern Gumi are clearly related to those who live in the regions of Badlung, Bukum, and Rolpa,
who speak Karen. Even if they have lost the knowledge of their language, many of them they traditionally form alliances between three clans residing in the same locality, even if the generalized exchange is less systematic there than in the locality of Taka, studied by Marco Pitts, for example. So, you have the scheme of the general exchange. So the maternal uncle gives his daughter in marriage to his veteran nephew, which in ordinary terms means that a brother gives his daughter in marriage to his sister's son. And this dimension is essential since the Magars like to emphasize that through this alliance between their children, the brother and sister recreate the bond between them that was broken by the sister's marriage. But it is a reconstruction in mirror and involving a different type of union at each generation, alternating blood ties and marriage ties. The sister's son is indebted to his maternal uncle for the woman he received from him. He must render him services and respect him. As they say, since we have taken his daughter, we must make ourselves small. This results in a whole series of inversions in the relationships that the Magars maintain with the bound Chautari. In fact, they have an opposite kinship system, and they generate their son-in-law with the idea that the gift of a daughter should have no counterpart, which would amount to selling her, as I often heard. And it is in this capacity of hierarchical superior that the Brahmins use their son-in-law as their domestic priest during the rites of the cycle of life. The Magars also often call upon their son-in-law for this very same office and declare in this regard, we do like the Brahmins, we use our son-in-law for the rituals. However, in doing so, they grant the priesthood not an eminent position, but rather that of a service, among many others, such as plowing a field or butchering an animal, reversing its traditional eminent place in the Hindu world. This also takes on a political dimension in this locality, where the village headman had always refused to allow Brahmins to officiate at the village goddess temple, and appointed instead a member of the clan of his sons-in-law, thus reaffirming the link that unites him to this divine person. The impact of this specific kinship system can be seen even in the contrasting conceptions of the gender of the son among neighbors who work shoulders daily. For the Magars, the son is Surya Devi, big sister, constantly pursued by her little brother the moon, Chandravain. This mythical pair is featured in a story that exposes the dangers of alliance outside this framework, a story of which plot is also widespread among the Hindus of Western Nepal, but with a different ending and moral, everywhere in line with the particularities of the rules of alliance and kinship. This suggests that the Magars probably borrowed the plot from their Hindu neighbors in order to anchor their rules and value more firmly in the face of neighbors with ideas so different from their own. As a matter of fact, they chose to perform this story, and interestingly, using mask and cross-dressing, as if they were exposing a hidden reality. When we consider that the son is the paternal and royal figure par excellence for the Hindus, in particular for the Thakur who claim direct descent from the sun. We may think of the numerous alliances formed between Thakuri princes and daughters of Magar chiefs or kings, and one cannot help to wonder if both parties saw these unions as a means to assert dominance over the other, based on the misunderstanding that ultimately facilitated the agreements. In the two cases studied here, we are faced with strategies inscribed in the context of acculturation, a concept developed in the 1930s and often categorized into different stages, leading to syncretism or full erasing of one of the group's original culture, as discussed by Vallandier, for instance. Acculturation was therefore theorized as if it were a linear process without possible reversals or bifurcations. Bourdieu proposed using the notion of, instead of hybrid subjectivity, drawing from his study in colonial Algeria. This subjectivity would import a coexistence of economic system and a fractured culture, not reaching the romantic vision developed by Fanon, who argued that submission to a domination, whether political, economic, or cultural, forges a revolutionary subjectivity. The concept of hybrid subjectivity has the advantage of leaving a whole range of directions open, but precisely it remains at a level of generality that does not help much to think. Therefore, while we can draw inspiration from these sociological concepts to reflect on the situation in Nepal, the unique characteristics of this context deserve a contextualized overview to highlight its particularities. Nepal did not undergo a colonial situation, strictly speaking, but a gradual occupation of certain areas of the territory, in particular the valley bottoms, by groups who arrived later than the Adivasi Janjati. At the same time, a shift in political power occurred both in a fragmented and cohesive manner, since the territory of present-day Nepal was controlled by a network of kingdoms ruled by families of the same caste with strong connections between them. Domination over indigenous populations has been achieved in successive stages, creating a puzzle that is impossible to reconstruct without oversimplification. While it is generally accepted that the Dalit are the indigenous people in Uttarakhand, this status is recognized to the castes or Matwali Chetri in far western Nepal, then to the Janjati from its western part up to the eastern border, erasing the Dalits' roots from the national territory. Thinking about acculturation relations in this framework is a challenging task due to the diversity of situations and the lack of historical documents. More than a theoretical framework from one which can certainly draw guidelines, such as rethinking the concept of Sanskritization developed by Srinivas in the light of current trends of desanskritization observed in Nepal, or by drawing inspiration from the Brazilian perspectivist developed by Viveros de Castro to highlight the striking phenomena of heterocentrism at work in Nepal, as I attempted to do in the past. It seems that we still lack case studies that are detailed enough to be compared in order to draw guidelines from them. My aim here was to emphasize cultural distortions, which are part of a hidden field that allows for coexistence with a group with different values without open opposition. This is an ancient disposition which sometimes emerges into the open as in this episode from the Chronicle of Nepal edited by Wright about a sanctuary to Shiva where bloody sacrifices were practiced, provoking disapproval and mockery from Indian visitors. The king, the text says, then asked that the identity of the god be concealed, not to stop the unorthodox practice of killing animals, taking the other into consideration, but with a view to deceiving him. In sum, this is a work in progress on which I would be pleased to have your feedback.
मरिजीलाई धन्यवाद। अब हाम्रो प्रश्न सोध्ने पालो अङ्ग्रेजीमा सोधे पनि हुन्छ, फ्रेन्चमा सोधे पनि हुन्छ होला, तर हामीलाई बुझ्न गाह्रो हुने भएर त्यो चाहिँ नगरौँ। अङ्ग्रेजी अथवा नेपालीमा सोधौँ अनि छलफल गरौँ। हात उठाउँ। चिया पनि बाँकी होला, चिया पनि खाऊँ। Yes, please.
I could not grasp everything, but from what
अलि स्वर त ठुलो बनाउनु पर्ला।
I could not grasp everything that you said, but from what I understood, from my understanding, my question is that you talked about Christian missionaries coming to Kathmandu and baptizing. The Newars took their babies to baptize. So my question is the mission and vision of Christianity involving the caste system of Nepali society? And the other thing is, the Newar people took their babies to be baptized when they got sick. So did they do that to escape the untouchability that existed in the Nepali caste system?
Well, it's a good question. In fact, we don't know more details about the caste of the people who brought their dying children to be baptized. But whatever the caste, in fact, there was an exclusion from the group in other cases. And it's true that the missionaries are not precise on this point. But my aim was to try to understand why so many Newar parents bring their dying child for baptism, whereas it was not the case in the Patna area, where the population was higher probably, nor in Tibet. So this is why my hypothesis is that it was brought to a local persons of soiling your dying baby or your sick baby or endangered baby to protect him. Yet, in the case, in fact, of the Newars, at that time, apparently there is no mention of a single baby surviving after that. So probably they were really brought at the very last moment. And in this case, I think it also fits well with a ritual way to send the soul of the baby, which is dangerous after death, because as he died from a violent death, he is likely to attack his sister and brother and parents, and so to expel him ritually from the caste and the family. So it's an hypothesis, but yet I think we need to try to find explanations to this surprising fact, which has not been mentioned in many books as far as I know. So I was myself surprised by seeing the numbers.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a small question? So the title of your research is on a cultural misunderstanding and distortions. So can you tell me in summary what were the misunderstandings and distortions that you found in this?
But that was our talk.
Yes. Okay, so the misunderstanding is on both ways. Baptism is supposedly a change of religion. In the Christian religion, it is a purification of the living. And obviously, it was not used at all in this way by the Newars, who consider on their side that it was a pollution. So you have a big misunderstanding from both sides, with the fathers, the Christian fathers, claiming that they were purifying and sending the children to the kingdom of God, and they were parents who did not write what were their goals, but whom we can try to guess, and this is what I was talking about.
Yes, please.
So my first question is, if the Newars considered the Christian as impure, then why did they allow them to preach their religion? That's my first question. And on the basis of what you shared, so there were 6 people who converted to Christianism in Vancouver, 42 in Kathmandu, and 18 in Pathali. They were living. So based on your research, then it seems that Kathmandu and Pathali were much more influenced by Christianity than in comparison of the coast. So what do you think made the people of the world less attracted to Christianity than in these 2 areas?
Yes, it's a good question, because the king of Bactapo was himself very much in favor of the father, because he is the first to have greeted them in his kingdom, offered them a nice house, which we have seen. There is also the fact that in Kathmandu you had the people called the Kachara, who moved from Kathmandu to Lhasa, and that some of them have been converted in Lhasa also, like a certain Michel, I don't know how to pronounce it, who when the missionary were expelled from Lhasa, came back with them in Kathmandu, which was his place of origin, and greeted them in their house first. So it's maybe around this mission that more people converted at the time.
I'm sorry, I was late, so I missed the half part of your earlier talk, but you were mentioning about the missionaries report. My curious is more kind of methodology, like reading at these reports, book reports, written by missionaries. It has a certain purpose. It was written for a certain specific audience. Given the fact that it was a missionary report, to what extent you would consider some of its limitation, or like maybe generally like reports tend to highlight certain things, or maybe underline certain things. Did you find any kind of or what were some of the challenges I may ask?
There are many challenges, but really it's because you missed the first part of my talk. The very interesting thing in the case of this Tibet mission, which was based in Patna, after that in Betia, in Kathmandu, Bhaktapur, and Patan, and Novakot, and in Lhasa. So we can compare free context. And it's by comparison that you can say that there was something special in the Kathmandu Valley, because no dying children's baptism are reported in Lhasa or India, only in Nepal. So probably they may have maybe increased the number a little bit, yet it's several thousands, so it's not nothing.
Just a follow-up. Where are the archives that you are accessing? I mean,
This was published by Petach.
okay.
5 volumes, 7 or 8. The 4 first volumes are really useful for Nepal. The others are
And Petich was doing it based on archives in Rome.
yes,
Okay.
in the Vatican.
So it's in French or in English?
It's in Italian. And then Father Vanini, who is also himself a Capuchin missionary, he wrote a very good but short book before, maybe after Petach, but it's in English and it sums up very well. It's called Christian Settlement in Nepal, I think. And he also wrote another volume on Capuchin mission in Tibet. So he mostly uses Petech documents, but also some documents that he only could read because they are based in different Capuchin missions in India. So I could not go and check in their library.
Also, सुन्छ
My question is, so how long did the missionaries stay in the Kathmandu Valley? And I'd also like to request you to please be explaining the purification process that you shared that was happening in Pokhara and that is not happening in Kathmandu. I did not understand.
Alors, how long did they stay? It depends. Well, if you consider the very first missions which took place in the 17th century, they said that those first missions were very short. After that, it really started, let's say, in the second decade of the 18th century, 1714. Then there was a short break, and after the conquest of the Kathmandu Valley by Prithvi Narayan Shah, they decided to go away. In fact, it's usually you find in history books that they were expelled. It's not exactly the case. If you read Father Vanini, who is a very good historian, I think, they were not allowed to have any more contact with their main station, which was Patna and Betia. And so for them, it was not possible to continue to stay because they had asked the Pope in Rome if they could buy some lands in the name of the Pope, in the same manner that the Bhaktapur house given by the King Ranjit Mala was given to the Pope directly. The missionaries asked for this request, and Rome refused that some lands would be attached to its name in Nepal. Otherwise, they could have stayed because they could have raised cultivate crops and so on. But they were fully dependent, in fact, from the money and all the things they received from India. So they took with them all the Christians, about between 60 to 80 people, and went to settle in Betia, where there was already a community apparently of this size, which has been settled by the Raja on the land of Brahmin, with whom the Raja was in conflict. But in fact, their strategies at the time were really to have the best possible relations with the kings and the court, because they had decided that if you convert the king, then all the population will convert automatically. And so it's interesting to see the difference in treatment, for instance, in the case of the young girl and the young boy converted who dies, the will of the king that the Christian could be integrated in the local caste system, and the reluctance of the subject, which is, of course, for us, this seems contrary to what we would imagine, thinking that the rules from above were stricter than from below. This was not the case. And about the purification, I did not speak of purification in the case of Pokhara. I said that I am interested in the practices consisting in soiling baby who the father or mother find in danger, either because he's sick or because his older brother or sister died, so they are afraid that the next one may have the same disease, because there is this idea that the soul of the dead baby can attack the second one. The people with whom I discussed last week, one really told me that this experience when he was 3 years old was very traumatic in Panauti, meaning that even if it has for us meaningless impact because it's purely symbolic. In fact, it can be presented by someone in his life history as something very hard, which he had to endure in his childhood. And the second case is that of a Ranjit lady, who is a possessed lady. In fact, this is why I was speaking with her, who explained to me that she had practiced this for her son, she had not endured it herself, but I did not ask her why she did that. I was more interested in the ritual procedure, and that it consisted in digging a hole, putting codon, which is pure, but putting the baby in it and throwing it, so probably symbolically, and pretending to give it to a Sarki lady. But the Sarki are non-Newars, so we can see in this case a Newar using a non-Newar impure people to our eyes to protect an endangered child. Yet, you are right, she's also using codon, which is very pure, so there is also a mixture of elements which should be inquired a little more. But I could not see any description in the books I read.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very difficult for me still to digest your presentation, but so you talk about, the different objectives with which the fathers are baptizing, and then, the Newars are basically, the objectives are different.
Yes.
And I mean, the fathers would surely have acted through interlocutors, possibly due to language and others.
I think they were speaking Newari. They even translated many books in Newari, so I think it's for their survival.
Okay, yeah. So the first question is, I mean, were the fathers not aware, of this misunderstanding?
I'm sure they were partially aware.
And
it's the same like this lady who used both something very pure and also something very impure. I think things are not straightforward, I think, for anyone, and probably the fathers were aware, but they would think that in their own perspective, they were also purifying this child. So you can imagine that there is also a coexistence, but still there is a misunderstanding because the significance and especially the meaning of this ritual is floating between two extremes of purification and defilement. So,
and then the second question is, okay, how do you compare this, what was then practiced in Kathmandu with the increasing Christianity that is happening now?
This I am not comparing. I'm comparing this rather with the relationship between the Magars and their high caste neighbors who use both the joint but in an opposite manner. So which I think is closer because you have the same person at stake with his ritual role, which is prominent both for the high caste and for the Magar, but with a completely different perspective on why they are doing it. Is it because they are eminent, or is it because they have their service and they should also do the ritual service for them? So I think it's more a twist of the same sort. So, and I have not really worked on the recent Christianization of Nepal. I've noticed it. Like,
Yes.
My question is, Basically, your presentation was quite counterintuitive to me, was quite surprising to me. What I have studied is that Christians were considered as Malays, those of downward caste people in Nepali society, or largely speaking in this subcontinent, I guess. So, how is it possible to purify the pollution of any person who themselves are categorized as impure by that society? That is quite baffling. And another thing is, and there is some resemblance to the worshipping of some fakirs, to Muslim aesthetics, I guess, from Hindu people. Can we relate with that also, this phenomenon?
Well, I have no idea about the worship of fakir in Nepal. I have never met this in the areas where I work. Yeah, probably, but I have not worked in the Terai at all. So, in fact, there are very few places where even I've seen Muslim settlements are very few. I haven't, there are one or two in the Gomi district, but it's very marginal. But about your first question, I think the problem is that the conception of Hindu pollution is not universal. It's not shared by the Christians, who think that they purify the sin of one person, and that even a baby has sins because it is inherited, it's the original sin. So this is what they purify. It's not any kind of pollution comparable to the Hindu pollution. So I think the misunderstanding can be also wider, because even the notion of purity is not the same in both contexts. So you are right that this is an additional dimension to take into consideration.
Okay, sir.
Because it's more closer to karma. In fact, it's the erase the path. This is Christian purification.
Christian are still called as Gai Khane people nowadays also. So
yes,
so,
I know. The context that to eat gai is something wrong also. So elsewhere in the world, people would say, why don't they eat their gai? No, something have to be.
Okay, just one. Yes, please.
I don't know if this question would be very relatable with your presentation, but you shared that the missionaries went out of Nepal, but many historians believe that they were expelled. So, is it a misunderstanding, or it is a distortion of fact, or if it's a distortion of fact?
Well, I accepted the fact that they were expelled, but reading Balini, I had a doubt, because he's very precise, he seems to have documents, and because in fact they came after that. I said that they went out, they went away after the capture of the Kathmandu, but in fact they were asked to come back, and also they had very good relations with, I forget, the sons of President Narayan Shah, who offered a big bell to the Patna church and almost converted himself. So for the very end, I think more inquiry should be done in the documents, but at least one father remained even as late as 1810, and Hamilton met him in 1823. But this guy came back for. He had an affair with a Christian lady in Patna, so he had to flee, in fact, the mission in Patna, and he took refuge in Kathmandu. But Probably he was well received by someone and he stayed there 20 years. So
When you say invited back, this would be by Christina and Shah's sons, or
yes.
do we know?
We don't know exactly.
Okay.
But in fact, there were requests from this not by Prithvinaraya and Shah himself, but his descendants to have other missionaries, because he had also cured his brother Hein during which was pierced during the first battle of Katipo, I think. And so, in fact, he kept good relationship with a number of people from the Gorkhali royal family.
That was very interesting. This is the first time I'm hearing that Christina and Shah's son almost converted, towards almost became Christian. That's a very interesting, historical. Can you tell us share the sources, if you have to read,
Yes. Well, in fact, I suggest that you read Father Vanini's volume because he's very clear on this point. I forget which documents he's quoting himself, but it's interesting. Also because, in fact, we have inherited the views of historians like Simaldi, who said they were expert point, which is not true apparently. So. Because in fact, they had themselves a lack of personnel in India, in Patna, and this is why they decided that they could not send anymore. They could not manage because they had then two missions, one in Patna, one in Betia. So to add a third one in Nepal was too much. They could not receive funds from Rome also.
Very interesting. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, thank you for inviting me and for the
So on behalf of everybody in the room, I'd like to thank Marie for the presentation today and request her to come back again and again. यो चियाको गिलास चाहिँ त्यहाँ राखिदिनु होला है।